This is Breaking Down Security, and I am Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
What's up, Mr. Brake?
Well, not much. Having to deal with getting interviews lined out is not fun.
Looking for a new job already?
No, trying to get interviews for the podcast and having to deal with handlers.
Oh, those interviews, huh? Handlers, yeah.
I love handlers. I've never had to deal with I've dealt with handlers before, but we ended up never interviewing those people. So we've got interviews coming up, but I've had to deal with handlers all week, and then all of a sudden they canceled. So hopefully the person we want coming on will be on soon, but there's no guarantees.
Why don't we have a mutual agreement where you'll be my handler and I'll be your handler?
I'll be your agent. You can be my agent. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't hate that. Yeah. Yeah, that would be nice because, but we have to promise to not, control people, or try to make the discussion go a specific direction, That was the other thing that kind of got me. It's the handlers are trying to push the discussion in a specific direction. And I love having people do that for me ahead of time. So I hope they're not listening because I really want the guy on, but they need to work on their delivery a little better, I think. So
we all have an agenda. We all have what we want, right?
Yeah, I guess. And, we're all big and popular and shite now. So it's like, people want to be on. So anyway, so let's get off that little mini rant and discuss something that came up this week. Actually, it came up in a Facebook group over there. The students of Security Plus, Network Plus, and A Plus had asked the question about antivirus, and I made the comment on the Facebook discussion that, people are still buying antivirus. And they said, well, what do you suggest when, should you buy antivirus? You shouldn't buy antivirus. And I started talking to Mr. Betcher, and we were trying to figure out what antivirus is good for, or is it absolutely good for absolutely nothing, Like the song, say it again now. Huh. Huh. Good God, no.
Well, I don't know. Is it worth nothing? They say that it captures less than 5% of malware these days.
Yeah. Now you know a gentleman, and we've had him on numerous times, who has said, Michael Goff in this case, and he's been on several times, and I believe he's said this fact every time he's been on the podcast. Antivirus catches about 4%, and that's on a good day. So there is a chance that antivirus catches nothing. So, I'm using his words against us here on this because I know that there's a place for everything. It's just, does antivirus have a place in the enterprise anymore? So let's start at the beginning and understand how AV works. So, there's a number of different ways to do that.
Sure. Most of the time, and what we've talked about where it only detects 4% is the signature-based method. So, and we've talked about hashing. It basically takes a hash of the bad juju and keeps that in a database or a master repository. And if the antivirus is running on your machine, and if it comes across a file that has a hash that's in that list, then it will treat it as a piece of malware, and it'll quarantine it. It'll keep it from running, it'll stop it, and put it away.
Yeah. So, those are the antivirus definitions that you're required to update on a regular basis. It's just a list of known bad file hashes, like bad known DLLs, known infectors or infected PDFs or that kind of thing. Yeah, so that was the way things used to work in the past with the antivirus definitions.
And they still do to a large extent. When you update your antivirus, you're just updating the signatures. You're getting new ones.
Sure.
Okay, and they're updated every day because you get new signatures every day. Somebody gets attacked, they upload it to these malware companies. The malware companies do their analysis and they say, yeah, that's bad. Based on our heuristics, and we're going to talk about that later, they upload the virus into a VM that they've specially built. And based on what it does, they'll say, yeah, this is bad or this is benign. And if it's bad, they'll hash it and load that to their signatures and send it out to all their customers, right?
Yeah.
So then you'll download that signature at some point.
And and it doesn't have to be once a day. They actually have you can download multiple times a day. I've heard of up to 4 or 5 times a day, depending on if the malware is active and if it's being actively used in the wild, or if they keep finding variants of those things. And there can be numerous variants. There can be an infinite amount of variants, because by adding things like white space or obfuscation methods, you can change the file size, the hash, and even the contents inside the file to make it look completely different, and it would still do the same thing.
Right. And this behavior is kind of like a IPS. It's looking for those signatures and it's blocking them.
Yeah. So it's blacklisting them, which, as we know, is not a very good method of, detection or prevention. You're not supposed to blacklist things because it takes forever and it's ultimately a losing battle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the behavioral and the heuristics type of antivirus. So it looks for, instead of looking for the exact malware, it looks for characteristics that all malware has or types of malware have.
Yeah.
So there's a threshold that they set. So if it does these things, it exceeds the threshold, and therefore we call it malware.
Yeah. And that it may be so for heuristics, it may be looking at the actual log files or activity on the system. So if you open up an Excel document, for instance, and you get the pop up and it says, "Hey, this has macros in it. Do you want to run the macros?" Most people go yes. And if you don't exactly know what Excel spreadsheet does, and you open an unknown Excel spreadsheet with macros, and then all of a sudden Command EXE starts up. That would be considered risky behavior that may light off the behavioral, the heuristics, because Excel and PowerPoint and Word and those other ones are not just supposed to open command.exe or inject DLL in a specific location.
It starts pinging China. It takes off your your Windows firewall and it borks it. Things like that are definite triggers for malware.
Yep.
So, LogMD, when we released the first, I guess, the beta version of LogMD, it was treated by some of the antivirus companies as malware because it looked at the audit policies that you had set. It looked for certain files in your admin space, and then it looked for certain registry keys.
So how'd you get around that? I mean, did you get around it, or did you just notify the AV vendors and say, "Hey, we have a thing and it does this. Please don't mess us up"?
Yeah, that's basically what we ended up doing. It still has probably two or three out of the 58, or I forgot how many there are on virus total.
Okay.
But it had about 8 or 10, and then we've got it down to 2 or 3. But we're not worried about it. New version's gonna come out and have a different signature, and so that'll all go away.
So you just put a little obfuscation in so it doesn't match any known file hashes, and you're good to go.
That's right. Okay. So we'll do that, and we'll also get a Microsoft signed, executable as well. So that helps, I'm sure. Yeah, if it's signed by Microsoft, then probably your threshold goes way up. From there.
Yeah, most malware that does get signed by a key from a known company, gets accepted more widely than just wild malware.
Yep.
So AV. So the other thing is with the heuristics, it takes time to tune because if you're normally doing things that are considered risky, like opening up Excel documents with macros, and the idea right out of the box is it's going to treat everything as as pretty risky. The ones with heuristics and behavioral modifications take time to tune because not everybody does the same things. A secretary who does email and internet and word processing and maybe some project management type things is going to have a different heuristic profile than, say, the developer who's going to be developing code using, GitHub and all the other things that developers would use, or the security guy who's constantly using VMs and, downloading code and downloading malicious packages and, using them inside a sandbox or something. So yeah, it takes time to tune those things. Thing is, and a lot of companies I've been to and consulted with and worked in, they don't often take the time to do that. So they often turn off a lot of the detection mechanisms to reduce the risk altogether. And sometimes they don't do so.
Not reduce the risk, reduce the workload on them, right?
Well, yeah, because when you first start it up like an IDS or an IPS, you may get a lot of false positives, and you have to go, okay, yeah, we know that's not an issue. Click here, Yeah. So yeah, they don't want to have to deal with all the additional false positives, so they get rid of things that would cause false positives. But yeah.
So that's why when you buy a IPS, you put it in monitor mode and you just leave it there forever monitoring.
Well, yeah, because you've checked a box, haven't you? You've put an IPS on the network. It's in listening mode.
Okay, so what's next? Back in the day.
Yeah.
Back in the day, antivirus. What was going on when it first came out?
Well, we've come kind of full circle. When I first started using DOS, I didn't have antivirus. I actually remember getting infected by what they called a terminate and stay resident or a boot sector bug because I was borrowing. Well, I was like 13 or 14, and my friends, because I didn't have the money to buy games and stuff, and my friend had access to a bulletin board, and he could, download games and stuff. So he'd burn me some CDs or not CDs, but he'd burn me some floppy disks and give them to me, and I'd run them on my IBM clone. And I did not realize that I was a frequent virus. I was infected.
Propagator?
Oh, yeah, I was a virus propagator, yeah, I'm fairly certain. But the thing was, I didn't have the internet. I couldn't afford it. So I would, install these programs and I would share them with friends and family. Little did I know that I had, bugs that could easily be found. And, that was the way it was. The sneaker net, it was a sneaker net, so viruses didn't propagate as quickly as they used to.
Yeah, you had to have that physical contact.
Yeah. And, the networks of people at the time were not very large until things like BBSs came about that allowed for greater, dissemination of viruses. But viruses weren't, I don't know, as malicious, or the attack surface wasn't what it used to be. I mean, now we've got command and control bots, botnets, and, doing denial of service. And back then you just didn't have a massive amount of people being connected to the internet. So there was no, there wasn't any need for it.
Yeah, so there was no way to monetize it back then. Now there is.
Yeah, so
with the rise of Bitcoin, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, and then of course, the internet happened. You got botnets and email and I love you viruses, and I think the technology went faster than Joe average user, and they didn't get proper training. So now everybody is using email and trusting things, and the trust model was back before the internet was, well, I trust the guy who gave me the disc, so I'm good with that.
Face, right?
Yeah, I've seen his face. I've talked to him. Now it's like, well, it's a website. I can click on this link. It's cool because I trust the website. It's google.com, or it's adobe.com, or, whatever. Or it's a Flash object. What's the problem with Flash objects? I use them all the time. So the trust model didn't change with the times. And people still take advantage of that because there's still a lot of people out there who either don't know or, well, some just don't care and they just want to get what they want. So
antivirus came around and it did a pretty good job.
Yes.
Because of the whole sneaker net thing. I mean, it couldn't mutate as fast.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was able to propagate, but if you had antivirus, then that signature probably lasted quite a while.
Sure.
Because it couldn't be changed on the fly like or it didn't have the technology to change on the fly like it does now, or download new versions of itself without the internet.
Yeah, it was hard to
So,
hide too, because I mean, until the registry in Windows came around, it was difficult to hide. I mean, it was actually still a physical file sitting on a floppy disk, or um, it was. Yeah, I mean, until it was just a lot easier to find those things back in the day.
right, and then like I said, antivirus did a pretty good job, and basically it was almost a requirement at some point for things like PCI.
Mm-hmm.
Right, your regulatory bodies said this is a good thing, and we need you to have this.
Yep. Yeah, the PCI standard actually is of 3.0, which I'm pulling up right now. I had up earlier, but antivirus. No, not virus. Okay, so yeah, there's a whole section in here, best practices for business as usual. And one of the things they require is the monitoring of security controls. They mention such as firewalls, intrusion detection or prevention systems, file integrity monitoring, which is like running hashes of the files in your system, or using tripwire or what have you, antivirus and access control. So PCI calls out antivirus specifically as a control for business as usual. You must have it because that is something that is needed to make yourself more secure. I think a lot of people, it's lined the pockets of companies like McAfee and Symantec for years.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, if you're mandated by a specific organization, you're pretty much set. I mean, it may not be the only product you have, but you're guaranteed a constant stream of use. And I mean, and antivirus now includes things like anti-malware and it finds anti-spyware, yeah, and there's free versions of everything out there.
So that reminds me of something. Let me get this out there. So anti-malware and antivirus and anti-spyware, those can pretty much all be lumped into antivirus. Okay, if you have malware bytes, it doesn't necessarily do a better job of getting rid of malware than, say, Norton antivirus.
Yeah,
I've had employees that would say, well, malware bytes gets rid of malware and antivirus gets rid of virus.
Yeah.
No, it's not. They're pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
So what are the flaws of antivirus?
Well, I mean, it doesn't find. I mean, if you're using typical antivirus, it doesn't find. It only knows what it knows. It's like vulnerability scanners. It only knows what it can scan for. It only knows to find what's out there. If there's something that has never been detected before, it doesn't know that that's a virus. And it will normally let it go through.
Yes. If it doesn't have that signature and it doesn't behave heuristically, like, it doesn't cross the threshold, then it's not going to flag it as malware, even though it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's got a lot of false positives. And we mentioned LogMD as a false positive. I know it wasn't malware because I wrote it and compiled it myself, yet it was still showing up. Why? Well, heuristically, when they exploded LogMD in their environment, they noticed it doing certain things that crossed the threshold. So, you do get those false positives. You can also get false negatives, right? So by false negative, we mean it is malware, yet antivirus doesn't see it as malware.
Yeah, and that really, the false negative is just, there hasn't been a file added to VirusTotal or submitted to the antivirus manufacturers to be included as part of their definition update.
Right, or a malwarian will have those, and by malwarian I mean people who write or use malware. They'll have antivirus themselves, and they'll see if it detects it.
Yeah.
And if it does, they'll change change their program up a little bit, change the little malware behavior, still accomplishes what they need it to accomplish, but maybe a little bit slower, maybe not do as many things as it did before, but it still gets admin on the system, something like that, and they'll make sure that it doesn't get hit by antivirus.
Yeah, and antivirus and anti-malware and anti-spyware systems could conceivably find these things if you have lowered your risk threshold enough to say, okay, things out of the ordinary, like DLL injection or something running from this directory that shouldn't be, those are high risk things. Nobody should be running anything from the temp directory. Nothing should be running from, Windows System 32 unless it's a Windows application, or no file should be created in this directory to be able to be run, that kind of thing. So, if your heuristics are set too high, that could be another flaw in your system.
So another thing is it does take time for these signatures to go through the system. So if you upload a known piece of malware that hasn't been detected before, it might take a couple of days for it to reach the end users, right? Before their antivirus starts detecting this same thing.
Yeah.
Now, here's what they do is they'll, if a system gets infected, the malware may download download itself anew, and then execute itself, its 2.0 version, and then delete its 1.0 version, so that it constantly keeps ahead of antivirus. Every day it gets a new signature, so it's never detected by antivirus.
Yep. Yeah, I had a point there. I can't remember it right now. But so the other thing is AV is just the price of doing business. That's another flaw. It's like you're spending a lot of money to deploy this, and the maintenance is often more than it's worth. If you don't have an easily maintainable and deployable method of updating your systems or to script up new policies, for instance, it could be a nightmare pushing out new updates to people.
Well, let's talk about that. What does this cost get you? What does it buy you in your company? Well, for one thing, it takes care of all the known malware so that you don't have to, right? There's millions of known malware out there that are just sitting on websites that have been pwned that no one knows about. No one knows that it's been, taken over by the bad actors. And you may have one bad actor that's taken over 100 websites, and they all have their copy of their malware out there. And people go to that website and visit it and download what they think is, Joe's PDF editor, right? But it's really Joe's PDF editor and a little something extra.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that malware is known, then antivirus should catch it. And people are uploading new signatures all the time that they find, right? In their engagements or in their company, they see this particular download. They'll upload it to VirusTotal to see if it's good or bad, if it's never been seen before. Then they'll be more suspicious of it. And then that'll go through the heuristics that we were talking about once it's uploaded. And then they'll typically flag it as malware, and then it gets propagated, right? And then, in your organization, you don't have to worry about that stuff that's older, right? So you don't have to have all your employees get infected with known malware. Antivirus takes care of that.
That's true. Okay, so you've got older malware. But if it's older malware, does that mean those versions are not going to be disseminated or used? I mean, I'm only thinking of command and control button. It's like you were saying, every time they push out a new update, the older versions may not be supported by the malware anymore, right? Or they may not be found in the wild anymore because, bad guys think, well, that's already been bypassed by somebody or whatever. I don't need to, I
Well,
can't use this because it's already been, breached or it's already been, blown up.
detected.
Yeah, detected. Yeah.
So a couple things. I do know somebody who, I guess, copied a CD with a bunch of older malware on it, and DEFCON 1 happened, and he had to say, whoa, I was just doing some research, right?
Were you that little?
I'm not mentioning any names.
Were you that little boy?
No. It was someone I know.
Oh crap! Was that me? I think it might have been me. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was on that CD we got during that class, wasn't it? I actually copied that from the CD to my laptop. Okay, yeah.
That's a bummer.
But
But anyway.
Thank you, Captain Call Out. I totally forgot that, and now I'm having PTSD from it. Great. Thank you.
So like USB drives, if you get some malware on your USB drive that's unknown and you hand it to a colleague and then all of a sudden it becomes known, you hand that USB drive to somebody and they plug it in, malware detects or antivirus detects it at that time on their computer while you may still have it.
Yeah.
Right, on yours.
Yeah.
So then you have that detection mechanism, and then as a incident responder, I guess you can investigate that. Where is this malware trying to contact? Do I have any other computers in my environment that are also trying to contact that command and control? Right, and then you can start. You've got the breadcrumbs now, thanks to antivirus. You've got that.
Yeah, well, that's the whole HIDs and HIPs thing. It's like, oh, you're this application is now trying to. I used to run Zone Alarm, God forbid, back in the day, the free version, and anytime I would have an application trying to open a tunnel to some site, it would always pop up and say, "Hey, you're trying to do this. Is this something you want to do?" You either had the choice of, and this was the home edition, so the enterprise version would probably be, if it's trying to do that, disable it, or allow the user to interact with it, but send an email saying that this was allowed, this was done, including what the user's interaction was. That way you can, watch or, blacklist that or whitelist that in the firewall if that's something that needs to be done.
So if you have an employee in your company that has triggered known malware with antivirus, you should get that alert. And that gives you, it gives you a couple of things. It gives you the opportunity for education, right? If they triggered known malware, then they've got some sort of behavior that actually led to that. Did they take a USB stick out of the parking lot and plug it in?
True.
Right? Did they visit a website and then download some unapproved software so that they could edit videos?
Yeah.
Right? Those types of behavior, it's a good opportunity to have a conversation with that employee and say, look, here's our company policy and here's where you broke it. Or here's the behavior I'm seeing. Here's what we recommend that you do instead.
Yeah.
And it gives you a chance, secondly, to investigate that further, right? Okay, I know you got a signature here for malware. It was detected, it was deleted, but did you actually install that software?
Yeah.
Did you try to bypass that detection somehow? When did you install this? Did you install it at 2:00 on Tuesday? Or did you install it before then and it was only detected at 2:00 on Tuesday? If they installed it before then maybe the signature didn't come until later. And then they actually installed malware, gave it admin rights, and then it was, just the dropper or the installer was detected later. But the actual malware is probably still on the machine.
Yeah.
Right. So it gives you those opportunities.
Yeah, you want to, if you're trying to do an investigation, I know you definitely want to have some kind of technology that will allow you to do a quick image of the system, because as we've talked about in the past, you can't always sit around for days working on a computer to fix fix the issue or to disinfect the system. You've got to, this VP of marketing needs his laptop back today for a big client thing. Oh crap, I accidentally clicked on this. I need my box back by the end of the day. So the best you can do is image that hard drive or pop out a hard drive, put in a new hard drive, and spin up a new image. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it depends on how much time you have, right? Do you have time to investigate every single hit with antivirus? Probably not.
Yeah.
But you can look, and if you do get alerts, you should get them in such a way that it tells you where the malware is, what type of malware it is. If it's some installer that was detected and you call the people and they didn't install it, then you're probably fine. You can concentrate on the much more deeper issues like, oh, it's a DLL. Mm-hmm. That's something you probably need to investigate. Or yeah, they did install it. Well, it's probably best to just reimage it. Yeah. I don't have time to try and investigate it right now. Let's just reimage your machine, get a clean machine, and let's talk about what kind of behavior led to you getting infected.
Yeah, where you fished or whatever. And also doing investigations, you can do those offline. You can image the box in its current state, save that information somewhere for analysis later, and then do a re-image of the box, the primary box or the alpha, and then give that back to the user and hopefully give them some education in the time that they've lost, and make sure that they reread the acceptable use policy, and don't click on links in your email from people you don't know, and vice versa. So my question is, what if you're forced to use antivirus? What if you, because of compliance or because your management just comes from the old school method of, yeah, we really need AV, because that's the way we've always been doing it. And, you as a blue teamer, you might be more involved. You might say, well, we don't deal with PCI. We don't have to worry about, sales or something. We're just a small shop with 5 or 6 people. See, I'm of the opinion, I don't think you need antivirus unless you're forced to have it. So I know that runs counter to what Mr. Bescher believes. But I haven't used AV in years. I don't know if it's because I just don't see any value in it, or if because I think it puts more, junk on your box than just, being smart and not clicking on links. So, I mean, if you're forced to pick an AV package, what would you suggest when you're getting an AV package? Is there anything that you should have? Is there anything you shouldn't get?
Well, I would make sure that it gets updates regularly, and that you're notified whether or not it's running, and whether or not it's getting hits and where those hits are, and that you're able to take whatever's quarantined and run that backwards so that you can test the malware that is caught. So the important thing is getting notified when somebody gets popped or when a signature is detected. That way okay, this machine is potentially compromised.
Yeah.
Why? Antivirus caught it already? No, not necessarily.
Well, okay. What happens if you do an update on your antivirus? Should you test the definitions before they get deployed? Because, I've heard horror stories about, they pushed out McAfee and, a necessary file in Windows directory is considered virus, ridden, and now the boxes are all hosed. Do you think antivirus is safe enough to deploy without having any testing done?
No, you should certainly do testing on it. Whatever type of software you deploy, it's no different than any other piece of software. I've had issues with antivirus in the past where it would, I guess take a long time to load your system and you have to kill it and restart it, those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I haven't had that many complaints from employees actually doing that. So I don't know what I did differently to cause that, but it was a one-time occurrence.
Now, what happens if you're running AV? Should you run AV on servers? In cloud-based systems, you're wasting cycles at that point because you're being charged by the CPU, you're being charged by the input output, or the IOPS in this case, you're being charged by bandwidth in many cases. Should you run antivirus on servers in data centers or on your AWS systems?
I would lean towards yes, but you have to take that risk under consideration. I mean, does the cost of it outweigh the benefit?
Yeah, there truly is a cost benefit analysis that you would have to run and go,
yeah,
we're really, we're going to waste $20,000, $30,000 a year allowing AV to be run on the boxes. And, in addition to the licensing and the time and maintenance, is that really worth, the 4 or 5% that we get from that protection?
Right. Or is it worth a potential breach? You got to look at that as well. I mean, I would say I would lean towards having antivirus because of the benefit that it does give. Yeah, it doesn't detect the latest and greatest APT. But if there's somebody that's broken in and he passes that heuristics model, it's going to get detected, and then you're going to get notified. It's just another way to A, get rid of the known malware, and B, give you just a level of confidence that something is looking on there, looking at your systems at all times, and then notifying you of when it does detect something. It's just that other layer of the onion of security, right? You can't rely on one thing. Let's have multiple things out there, multiple layers that have to be breached before your data starts to leave the organization.
Okay, that's a good point. You mentioned your onions, your defense, your layers, your defense in depth, if you will. Mm-hmm. Could not the same kind of controls be put in place to mimic enough AV functionality that you would not have to deploy AV? Because I argue that with the use of an IDS or a network IPS or IDS and proper firewall controls and spam and gray tar pitting and gray listing on emails, I think that you don't need antivirus in that respect.
Yeah, it depends on the other tools that you have and if they cover antivirus well enough. I mean, if you have, you have to have, what do we call that? VPN, where when you log into your environment, it gets off the internet, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those kinds of things.
Split tunneling.
Split tunneling. You have to have split tunneling disabled. Things of that nature. Where if some admin's laptop is popped, then it can't get directly into the environment, right?
Okay.
Into your secure zone. But then again, if it does, and you're not running antivirus and it's known malware out there, are you looking for those, right? Via some other means.
Okay. So we mentioned logging from the AV package on what you should be looking for. Obviously, if your HIDS and HIPS capabilities, and also being able to push out new updates to those as well, you're going to have controls on that. I would have also added, we have 4 things on here, but I also would have added easy to customize heuristic function so that you can say, okay, if we, you can almost whitelist some heuristics, like, we want to make sure nothing runs in temp. So if we have EXEs in temp, quarantine those automatically. They shouldn't be running in the first place, or any DLLs in temp. Quarantine anything in the temp directory, because nothing should be running in those directories.
Monitor your run keys, things like that.
Registry monitoring as well, to make sure that is something you should do. A lot of people talk up application whitelisting. I would suggest doing that as well. But that's also a bigger problem, because you've got policies that say, you can't, when you do that, you've got applications have to be approved by IT or by your supervisor or whatever. A lot of people might find that to be too restrictive, because, hey, I want to be able to download Atom text editor. Well, we don't allow Atom text editor. Sublime is what we use here. It might be a pain in the ass. Kind of like a BYOD. Oh, that's a whole other big thing. Would you put antivirus on mobile devices? And how well does it work on mobile devices? Is it even useful?
I don't know. Don't let mobile devices access anything. Keep them separate.
Oh, you're a sweet kid. Have
Yeah.
you not listened to Cheryl Biswas's talk that I did on Shadow IT and that?
Oh, I heard it.
Okay,
I
and
didn't hear
actually,
of it. I heard of it and I heard it.
and
Yeah.
if we get that gentleman that I talked about earlier on, we will discuss that with him as well, if that's possible. So, and the other thing is obviously email notifications if for suspect traffic. Problem with that is, you're going to have to realize that the first couple months you set it up, you're going to get flooded with false positives, or so yeah. For a while there, you're going to have to tune the noise out. So don't just start ignoring them immediately or trashing the emails you get, because out of the thousands you're going to get, if you don't tune it properly to begin with, there may be some in there that are actually useful. So
Yeah. Actually, application whitelisting is a good idea, and it certainly could take the place of antivirus, but it's very hard to implement.
mm-hmm.
I mean, you get a lot of false positives
Yeah.
on that, and you have to really tune it.
Yep.
It's not automatic.
Yep. So let's say, our last little thing we wanted to talk about was what's beyond AV. Because if you're a blue teamer, maybe there's, maybe you already have AV in there as a checkbox for compliance, but, like we say with compliance, it's just a baseline security model and you want to go further. There's options out there. There's, bringing in companies that will send you feeds of what's in your industry. So if you're in the petroleum industry, or if you're in banking and finance, or healthcare, there are companies out there that will send you information about intelligence for people who are attempting to do things against your industry, or maybe you in particular, if they've noticed that you're being attacked. There's a number of them out there. You got the Mandiants and the Fire Eyes and the CrowdStrikes and the Bit9s and all those folks. They have those. There's open versions. I think you can get on chats and Twitters, and they'll there's stuff like that too. There's also managed service security providers that will basically mimic AV in many cases, where they'll monitor your systems for you and let you know if there's any problems. And you've got a dedicated person there, and they're watching your stuff. Auditors love MSSPs. They love to know that you've got those things, because you're spending money and you care about security. So they love that stuff.
Yeah, and beyond AV, that's why Michael and I created LogMD, to go beyond the typical malware detection, right? But in order to go beyond antivirus, you have to really understand what's going on underneath all the gadgets.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to be what our next podcast is over. Right.
Yes.
We're going to talk about Moxie over mechanisms.
Yep. Yeah. Knowing what's under the hood. When you're
doing your homework.
Yeah, not an over-reliance.
Understanding your environment. Don't just rely on a tool to do the work for you.
Now, slow down, Haas. We don't want to be giving too much away, because it won't come back. That's what Just give them a little taste of the cow, and then give them the whole cow later on. So,
all right.
So let me ask you, what's your takeaways from our discussion here? I mean, what should people think about when they're using AV or deploying AV or not using AV?
Well, I'm gonna stick my neck out there, and I'm gonna say your company must run antivirus.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
In some form or fashion, and require it in a policy.
Come on, bro.
Okay?
Why are you wearing an I love antivirus t-shirt?
I love McAfee.
The problem. Okay, so let me ask you something. Would you say that if you were not creating an application that does post investigation breach stuff?
Yes, because what I'm doing is we're looking at stuff that antivirus doesn't catch. All right. So, for us to be successful, you don't have to be running login, or you don't have to be running antivirus. I don't care. Right.
Well, you would because if you got infected, they would want to use your product, right?
I would want them not to use antivirus. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So they get infected and be.
And they want to use your product.
I think people who listen to this podcast understand the limitations, at least after this episode, right? Understand the limitations of antivirus
True.
pretty well.
True.
Right. And they know that it's not enough. But
Okay.
I just wanted to do this cast to say, here's what the benefits are. Here's what it buys you. Here's how much time it saves you. You don't have to be chasing a lot of this stuff that would have been caught anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And spend all that time.
Okay.
And let me give you an example. Okay. There a lot of malware infects in this way. There's the first phase of it, which is the initial pwnage, right? Either you click some link and get JavaScript running, or you have you install something, or you click on an attachment, right? Or you say, oh, it says you must click macrosis now, right, on this Word doc.
Yeah.
So you click enable macros, things like that.
Okay.
So that's one. And then two is you get this this executable running, which is called a dropper. Okay. So this dropper isn't the malware itself. And that's typically what antivirus detects, is the dropper. Okay. But it doesn't go beyond the dropper usually and detect the actual malware. So if the dropper is allowed to execute, then it downloads the bad juju, the really good stuff, right? The malware itself. And then it executes the malware itself, and then the dropper gets deleted. So then the malware is allowed to stay, but antivirus is sitting there going, well, I don't see any droppers, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, that's a valid reason to have antivirus if you're trying to find the signatures, or, the initial bit there. Of course, I'm still in the camp that you only need it if I think you're forced to use it. I think that with enough defense in depth that you can, get away with not having AV. I think with a big enough organization, I think there's a point where you're going to be forced to anyway, because with a big enough organization, you're going to have to deal with compliance or best practice frameworks that suggest you do these things. So if you want to be an ISO compliant, you may have to require some kind of scanning tool, whether it be some kind of continuous monitoring on for vulnerabilities, or just have an AV. It really depends on, for me, what you have in your environment. If you're using cloud-based systems, it's really going to be like neck and neck on whether or not that's even a value for you, because you're wasting money every second you're running AV on a cloud instance. So, but you make very good points. I mean, how much is the cost of a breach? I mean, Target's paying 17. Well, the last thing I heard was 17, anywhere between 17 to $40 million for, not, doing what is necessary for catching the malware. So, I mean, it really depends on how much business you do. If it's, if antivirus is a couple of $100,000 and you're $1 billion business, go ahead and get it. But, if you're neck and neck, and, it's, if you can show other controls in place that would detect those things, or if you have some heuristics model that you can use to, make policies that are faster than AV, I say go and do it, and AV, maybe don't put AV everywhere, just put it on, maybe just user systems instead of servers, and, train your people not to be stupid. Education, if you can even get one person to not click on a link or to do proper reporting, then you may have saved yourself a couple $100,000 in buying a brand new antivirus license. So,
and if you're in the cloud and you don't want to run scans all the time and use up all that what you pay for processing power, right? And running scans is costly. You don't have to scan. You can just do the it leaves or if it enters the environment, it'll scan it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you could probably have something that would monitor your sensitive directories. For Linux, I know if you set no execute on temp or, those kinds of things, you're going to get rid of a lot of your issues. Setting, what was that? Auto run when you plug things in, disable that. That'll get rid of a lot of malware and poisoned apples. So somebody would actually have to go into the thumb drive if they found it in a parking lot and click on, stuff inside of the thumb drive instead of it automatically starting when you plug it in. That's, another method of cutting down on the amount of malware. So, Mr. Betcher, as always, it's a pleasure talking to you. How would people find you if they wanted to continue talking to you?
Well, you can reach me on the Twitterverse. I'm at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can also find my contact info at imfsecurity.com.
Oh, that's right. You do. You're all fancy. You're like president, CEO, caterer, janitor, everything. Yes. So what's the lunchroom like at imf.com or whatever, the world headquarters there?
It's a park bench right now, but we're getting there.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. Some a lot of napkins with crib notes on them. Yeah, okay. All right. So the Breaking Down Security Podcast Twitter is at BrakeSec, BRAKE-SEC. Mine is at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And, we're on Facebook. By the way, Facebook, thank you for no longer allowing me to promote my posts on there for some ungodly reason. If you find value in our podcast, please share our podcast wherever you can, because they're no longer getting my $15 every 2 weeks now. So I'm going to have to figure out where else I can spend my money more creatively. We have a LinkedIn page. We have about 20 or 30 people on there. We believe in the value for value model. So if you are a fan of supporting podcasts or, you've just got some extra money stashed away somewhere and not using it, you can support us on Patreon. We're over there on Patreon, so that's great. We're on TuneIn. If you have a friend who likes to listen to internet radio, we are on TuneIn Network. We just got on Stitcher, which is great. You can follow us on Stitcher. So that's... I'd like to thank all the people on iTunes for their feedback. We got a couple more people giving feedback over there. And, of course, our Patreon people who support us now is we love you folks. You're, the podcast will always be free, but, we appreciate everybody who gives some money. Jay Schulman, we had him on a couple of weeks ago talking about BSIM. He gave $1 on there, and I was like, well, what did you do that for? You didn't have to do that. He was like, it was well worth it. And I was like, oh, that's very cool. I appreciate that. So, we thank him and all of our new sponsors on Patreon. So, everybody, that was it for this week. So, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, also, you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail. So, we love the feedback, and we'd love to talk and comment on that more. So, Mr. Betcher, we will be back next week with hopefully your tools podcast there. And everyone have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
And we're out. Man, bastard! What'd you bring up the thing about the? I totally forgot about the infecting my work laptop with the malware stuff. I can't even. I don't. Or I remember that too because I plugged the CD in and
they were like, you got infected.
I remember getting the phone call and they're like, what did you just put on your computer? Oh God, I remember that.
I dropped it into a cesspool. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, I plugged that that CD-ROM in that had all that stuff on it. My bad. So, thankfully, antivirus did catch that, so that was always a good thing, boy. Oh,
God. That was some old shit.
That's awesome.